start. All right, guys. Before we start the meeting, like a couple of quick announcements. Number one, this is our very first video meeting we've ever done. So I would first like to ask the public to give us a little leeway as we're working our way through this. As we learn more about the process and learn more about it, more and more options will be available. We're dipping our toes into it right now. Secondly, I would like to personally, on behalf of myself, the board, and all the men and women,
Got a couple more people I'm trying to get admitted here. Trustee Saylor, can you hear us okay?
Yeah, I can hear you. You have video going for one of the participants.
Yeah, I do have it enabled that participants can use their video. So
oh, okay. I
have them all set on silent. So I have everybody set on mute automatically, but okay. I do have their videos enabled if they would like. I just wanted to do that sound check.
Perfect. Again, like I said, for the new people, this is our very first televised meeting. So we're asking people to give us a little bit of leeway as we work our way through the process. It's all new to us, and we're new aspects of this. So, you know, as the time goes on, we will get better and better with using this new technology. Secondly, I want to, on behalf of myself, the board, and all the men and women of the fire district, would like to personally thank our resident Kyle Wolver, who donated all the video equipment here for having this. It was an amazing gift, and it shows that our residents are engaged and really do care about their fire district. And personally would like to thank him on behalf of the entire fire department. It's an amazing gift. Thank you very much. Lastly, I want to make sure just a COVID note. We are all social distanced here apart. Most of us are not wearing masks simply because the acoustics in this room are not necessarily the greatest, and it's very difficult for us to hear each other sometimes. And we've made mistakes, misunderstanding from the trustee, fire chief, or a resident has said, and we made sure we're separated, spaced out, so we can actually hear each other and communicate properly. So anything beyond that, I'd like to call our notice of public hearing meeting to order. Robin, could you please call the roll for that?
President Clayton.
Present.
Secretary Sachs.
Present.
Trustee Callis.
Present.
Absent Trustee Saylor. Trustee Simpson. Also present.
Trustee Saylor is.
Oh, I'm sorry. She's here on Zoom. Get used to that. Also present Chief Evans and Attorney Webb.
Thank you, Robin. Purpose of this public hearing is to discuss the 2020-2021 annual tax levy, our ordinance number 335. Are there any questions, concerns from the board as it relates to this meeting and this ordinance? Right. Are there any questions from the general public as it relates to the tax ordinance and our annual levy? Any questions? Alrighty, thank you. Since there are no questions, mark the floor. Do I have a motion to adjourn the public hearing? So moved. Do I have a second? Support. Any questions? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Alrighty. Let us call the meeting for the Woodfield Fire Protection District for December 15th, 2020 to order. Brian, will you lead us to the pledge, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Robin, please call the roll.
President Clayton.
Present.
Secretary Sachs.
Present.
Trustee Callis.
Present.
Trustee Saylor.
Here.
Simpson. Also present Chief Evans and Attorney Webb.
Thank you, Robin. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes for the Woodfield Fire Department regular meeting for November 17th, 2020? So moved. Do I have a second? Support. Do I have any questions on the regular meeting minutes? No. Okay. Do I have All in favor of approving the minutes? Any opposed? You. Do I have a motion to approve the executive session meeting minutes for the Winfield Fire Protection District for November 17th? I'll support that. Any questions on minutes? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Remarks from the floor. Any comments from the public? No comments from the public. Reports. Treasurer.
The Treasury report has been passed out and given to all the trustees. If there's any questions, please let me know. As other than that, is that presented?
George.
I make a motion to accept the treasurer's report as presented.
Do I have a second? I'll second that. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Chief.
Thank you, Mr. President. Going back to previous months, the West Suburban Fire Rescue Alliance monthly drills between all of our 6 member agencies are postponed in light of COVID. So we had no special operations drill and no multi-company drills this month. Recent incidents of note on the 1 South area of Winfield Road, we had a structure fire on November 19th. We were assisted by Warrenville, Wheaton, West Chicago, Carroll Stream, Bartlett, and Bloomingdale, and Roselle. The reason why so many agencies is we had to bring in tenders because it's an unhydrated area. And of note with this particular incident, our companies responded, were held by training from Winfield Road crossing, had to divert to the County Farm Road overpass. And as a result of that, Warrenville, thanks due to them, was first on the scene, did an outstanding job. They got their engine down the driveway and began offensive fire operations while the other companies were arriving. It wasn't incurred delay. We then, since Warrenville was the first engine, our company did a fantastic job of establishing water supply and getting that whole rural operation going. And thankfully, the fire was stopped without further incident, no injuries, civilian or fire service related. On November 24th, the engine and I both went to Warrenville for a structure fire. On December 4th, we had a small kitchen fire on the 200 block Providence Lane. That was Gold Shift. We were assisted by Carroll Stream, Wheaton, West Chicago. And on December 6th, our tender went to Bartlett for another rural fire. There were no service anniversaries to report this month. In terms of other things, going back to our FEMA grant, as everyone will recall, we were awarded a grant from FEMA to replace our outdated air packs, which were also, as a discussion point, out of warranty. So every time they broke, we had to pay for service, whether it was a failure or we broke it, which got expensive. So they were outdated, did not have a lot of the more common and modern safety features, which was why we pursued the grant and were awarded one. The evaluation continues, and I just wanted to briefly touch on a few things with the air packs for the meeting. So what we're going to, the modern air packs are warranted for life, so as long as you have them maintained, so that'll be a cost saver for the district. The big thing with these are, they have built into them, you can see a hose on the side, the connection on the side, the ability, if you're trapped, for people to hook up spare bottles to you and be able to supply you air while they effect a rescue. So what some of the concerns that we're having, or internal conversations and in our evaluation, is there is an older style which takes 4,500 PSI of air pressure in the bottle. Our pre-existing air bottles as we have them are 30-minute bottles. So this bottle holds 30 minutes worth of air under ideal conditions. Under firefighting conditions, it's far less than that. One of the modern changes in modern air packs, and this is a matter of the NFPA standards, National Fire Protection Association standards, it used to be, and on the air packs we currently have, when you have 1/4 of your air left, it goes into alarm to let you know that you're low on air, you have to get out of the building. Under the new standards, that went from 1/4 to 1/3. So actually you have less usable air in these bottles before you're supposed to exit a building, which can be problematic. So we have two really options at our disposal: 4,500, which would be the same size bottles, but we would have less usable air because of the change in the standard, or we can go with 5,500, 5,500 bottles, which, if you look at the combination between the two 30-minute bottles, this one's considerably smaller, considerably lighter, on a 5,500 PSI pack. The complication is our current air compressor and air system in our station will be challenged by having that much more air requirement to fill the bottles. So we're going through the process of a cost analysis of is going with these 5,500 pound system for an air pack that will last many, many, many years, giving us that extra air on the scene, cost benefit analysis with respect to the price of what will ultimately result in us having to upgrade our compressor and our air storage system correspondingly. As you can see on the floor, and we'll go through after the meeting if you like, the difference between the 45 and the 5,500 gallon pound bottles. 5,500 is obviously smaller, obviously lighter, and then weighing all of that together, along with going out to our neighboring agencies' training facilities and taking them through training, testing, air pack mazes, fire evolutions to see what's usable for the troops, and then figuring out where we're going to go.
Have we ever had an issue, not only us, but our neighboring agencies, where that was an issue, that you guys have to get out, we're running out of air? Or have we run into that situation? Or
we have unfortunately had, over the span of my career, many occasions when people were trapped or missing in buildings, Maydays. I myself have been in a Mayday twice. So several of our other members have too, several other member agencies have. And
so the larger bottle is certainly a plus.
Well, but also, it would be considered a life safety issue, not only for our firefighters, but also for the people, our residents that are in duress. We have more time to find them and more time to save them. Right?
Absolutely. So more time in the building with those bottles is a big deal on many fronts. You breathe the air till you're out if you're stuck. Believe me, I've been there. And we have similarly RID packs. So the RID team, which is one of the companies that get dispatched specifically to rescue us if we get trapped.
Right.
They have a bottle in a pack that they bring in so that they can augment your air supply while they're trying to effect rescue operations. So there's a lot of things that go into this, and there's a lot of stuff that's prearranged, pre-drilled in the system. So all of that goes into play. And then similarly being able to match up with our partner agencies, most of whom switched to 55, but again, not all of them. So that's all part of what's going into the analysis. In case you were wondering why we've been taking a very methodical approach towards this examination, because there are costs involved and there are considerable benefits and liabilities involved. So we're being very clear that when we make our determination, it will be for all of the reasons. So
That's one follow-up question.
Yes.
The compressor to fill the 55 bottle, if we have to get another compressor, I'm assuming it's a filter compressor designed specifically for breathing air.
yes.
When you purchase the compressor, do they give you do they buy the old one back from you?
That's one of the things that we're investigating now. Our coordinator for that, one of our firefighters, Brian Berg, is actually in the process with that now, trade-in options, all of that stuff. So the compressor itself, our compressor will go up to 6,000 PSI. So we'll fill a 5,500 gallon bottle, but that's at the top of its range. Similarly, our storage system, we have X number of big bottles that hold 6,000 pounds of air. But there's an issue with the volume. At that high pressure, it takes up more volume. So the compressor would run more to fill bottles. In addition to that, the current system we have, back when actually we bought that, when air bottles were a little over 2,000 pounds, 2216s. was the system that was the compressor that was what it was designed to fill originally. Similarly, when you put these in the compressor to fill them, there's a fill station with a blast shield in it. That blast shield is only rated to 4,500 pounds, so that's part of it too. We would have to replace blast shields in case a bottle fails. Right. So all of that stuff would be involved. So the trade-in options, what we would have to do in additional storage capacity, and then so all of that is being worked out, and I'll have a report similarly for the board for the next meeting. You should be completed with that by then. Okay, thank you. Moving on, obviously we mentioned the live streaming of the meetings. Thank you again, Mr. Wolbert. Work continues on the IRMA focus group. Andrew Martin is working extraordinarily hard with IRMA staff to clean up a lot of the stuff because of the fact that we're in the focus group because of a series of unfortunate injuries we sustained some time ago. And so a lot of that's going to involve bringing before the board in the future changes and amendments to our policies and procedures as a result of us entering into that focus group and taking us through to completion of that. So just know that that's going, and know that Andrew is working very, very hard on it. So in the coming days, in the imminent future, I think, Robin, actually, we expect to get a substantial reimbursement through the CARES Act. So
139,000.
yeah, I'm not sure the exact number, but it's quite a substantial amount. Same thing goes back, compliments to Robin for administrating that to put in for that reimbursement funding, which will obviously help out our district tremendously. Like to update the board as to TIP 2. If you see, actually, Dr. Rich headed up a community group. Trustee Cal's is aware because he was present. We went to some community group meetings. As a result of that, a seasonal newsletter, which just came out the other day. And as part of that, and then going back to their December 3rd Village Winfield meeting, there was discussions about possibility of revisiting TIP 2. So I think that should be a discussion point for the board on our position with respect to that. So, Attorney Weiler, do you have anything to add in terms of the TIP 2 issue?
No, other than we have to be cognizant of the the public comment periods and we will be getting notices with regard to that. But just overall, we're looking at a TIP building that is going up. It's going to be a 6-story building that we're going to have to protect with no tax revenue.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's in a TIP that's already approved. So the
We
extent
got a
to which
parking
we
garage
can-
going up too.
the extent to which
Couple of
we can
office buildings.
or,
Office buildings.
this is unlimited development, and TIP is really supposed to be for the elimination of blight, and there's just no blight. So,
Well, I think the tip, that would have been great and wonderful. We can't, we can't protect it. And yeah, the development is great, development is wonderful, development is important for us, and it's great. We can't protect these
Yeah,
places.
but it has an impact on the schools.
Right, it has an impact on everything.
It
And
definitely has an impact on us, and it's becomes a challenge, not, for us, it's a challenge. It's more to deal with for basically less dollars. I mean, it's, when you're not getting, when people are getting a service basically for free, while the rest of the community is paying their taxes, the village has done a very poor job in representing itself. And I think they're violating the trust of all the people that live in this.
so it is I didn't really mean that. I don't want to develop a debate about it, but in terms of emphasizing the importance of paying attention to it, because of it's extremely critical, because we do have these enforcement or these protection responsibilities to protect buildings that are outgrowing the resources that are provided to us for protecting them. So we have to be very, very alert and watching all of our opportunities to participate in that process.
And to that point, for example, the 6-story apartment building, 5 stories on top of ground level parking, which makes it a 6-story building, which according to our our standard operating guidelines and our neighboring agencies constitutes a high-rise building. So the standard response for a fire alarm, an activated fire alarm there, is 2 engines, 2 trucks, medic unit, and 2 chiefs. We have an engine, a medic, and me.
Right.
So we're already reaching out to at least 2 of our agencies to come here. Report of smoke, that doubles. Working fire, that triples. That's a lot of stuff.
Is that building sprinkler?
It is.
Okay, thank goodness it's sprinkler. Okay.
But
You have to supply those sprinklers.
Right.
To supply those.
yeah,
sprinklers.
so it's immediately a burden on us to the point. So we have to be very
And we have to inspect.
thoughtful about the fact that the burden being placed on our agency.
Well, then do we as a board take an official stand on this? Do we feel at this time that we know enough about it to take a position on TIF 2? Or do we want to just see how it unfolds before we as an organization to take a stand?
There was at one time some talk about some dispersion of funds. I don't think it was ever put on paper though, about TIF 2, and we had some discussions, but I don't know what our stand would be. Our stand is, it doesn't work for the school, it doesn't work for the library, it doesn't work for the fire district, it only works for the village and
It's a detriment of everyone else.
yeah, to the detriment of everyone else. But, 20 years from now, I think they kicked the can 20 years before we collect taxes on that. Is that how long it was?
I think they
18.
extended.
18, 20, something like that, 20, 22, 23
years. They
23
extended
years,
it.
okay. Yeah, well, I'll be dead.
So, well, and please no.
We don't want to see that.
Not tonight, Joe.
Well, there's some good news in this.
Yeah.
Update report, the new employees, we have 2 people that have tentatively accepted the position. They have to go through the processing, which was delayed because of COVID. So there was a lot of issues between our occupational health facility to send them for pre-employment physicals, background stuff, polygraph. There was a lot of complications because of COVID-related issues. So that was delayed, but it is in progress, and we're doing our best to get those people here to give our folks some relief.
Much needed relief.
Yes. Turnout gear report. That also is in progress. Jeff Pester, our firefighter that coordinates turnout gear and uniforms, has been working with vendors. So he's arranged dates and times for them to come in and start measuring to start getting that build out done. So that's underway, in progress. So that's also good news for everyone. Engine 31. We received notification just a few days ago that, as you'll recall, that's being sent up to the factory in Wisconsin near Pierce to have the back end of the vehicle removed, frame rails replaced, and some other structural issues going on with that vehicle. It's going to be gone for several months. We've just received notification the other day that on or about January 18th is when they're going to be taking it to deliver it up north for the repairs. So I've been going through a process, as I've updated the board, I've been going through a process trying to find what are we going to do for a fire engine, because as we're aware, that is our only functioning fire engine at the moment. So what are we going to do in its place while it's gone? So through the dealership, a initial estimate in the proximity of $300 a day for a rental, $9,000 a month. Similarly, Lieutenant Daly has been searching the used market, and we'd be looking for some pseudo-functioning vehicle for the neighborhood of $30,000 to $60,000. So I've been going through some more local possibilities, and it appears as though at this point now West Chicago just got a brand new engine. Their second brand engine in a couple of years, and they're going to have a spare. So if they can get their new engine in service and there's no major issues with it, we're required to go back to the factory or anything. If there's no major issues with it, they'll have a spare, and we're going to be able to borrow that vehicle for that period of time that our engine's gone, for a nominal expense, other than probably setting out for have maintenance and a pump check and a pump test done on it, and do a little bit for it to show our appreciation as all more it would cost. So that's a good news and a big win for our community.
Yes.
Thank you, West Chicago.
Yes. So, as you know, we have a couple of members off on long-term injury. One of them happens to have some experience, knowledge, expertise, certifications, training, some things to do with fire prevention and training related activities. So it is my intention to bring that member back to light duty, working 4-hour weeks, because he can do a lot of administrative tasks well. And it is my intention to give him notification to bring him back in that capacity, unless anyone has an objection to that. And he'll do well there, and it'll help us with talent. It'll help our agency and our community out a lot, and absolutely, and it'll also get him out of the house, which means. And then for the board's direction, I had contacted my neighboring fire chiefs with the neighboring fire districts about the possibility of ceding land, and they were all receptive to any future conversations. So as I had mentioned in the last meeting, those conversations have taken place, and
we'll discuss that a little further when we get down there.
And then last thing I wanted to talk about, just as an interesting little thing, because as the board knows, I'm a big fact guy, facts and figures and stats and that kind of thing. I'm the vice chair of the DuCounn Fire Operations Committee, been on that committee a long time. And according to their statistics, it is interesting that in the era of COVID, actually call volume, generally speaking, has actually gone down a little bit. Less people are out about whatever the reason is, call volume has dropped universally. Interesting point, of the 22 fire agencies with DuCounn, one and only one is up year to date over last year, us. There are agencies down as much as 25%. Most of them are down in the teens. We are up slightly, but we are up for the year. We are actually, our run volume, the Lowell Winfield, is similar call volumes to Glenside Fire Protection District, Hinsdale, Oakbrook Fire Departments. We're up there with them now. So it's just an interesting little thing when you're out about talking to other folks in the community that we're not so little anymore. And that was all I had to report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Chief.
Bernie?
Yeah, before we proceed, I've been told that there's about 10 people that have joined since the public comment section was announced, and I would suggest that we reopen public comments for the opportunity for anybody who has joined us to make public comment. As part of the Open Meetings Act, each meeting must have within its agenda a section for the opportunity for members of the public to make comment. And so we don't really have any specific procedures over the internet, but if anybody just wants to, if you
Luke,
want
could you open it up?
You may want to put into your protocol that people should use the raise their hand feature because I've got chat disabled, and I've got the attendees opening their own microphones disabled. But I would suggest that as your protocol, you may ask them to use the raise their hand feature. It's a button that they toggle, and it'll show on the right side of the screen next to the microphone. So there'll be a raised hand that a blue hand that appears if they wish to interject their own comment. So nobody has.
Although I will interject that specifically be for a public comment time period. Because otherwise the meeting could take forever if we have them just
Right.
interjecting whatever.
Right, just to the public, but let's open it up again to the people who just.
And I don't know, no
Wait.
one's texted me or emailed me that said they wanted to. I just wanted, I think you might want to let people online know what the process is. There is one person who
Okay,
has raised their
open it
hand.
up.
The one thing I do want to point out is you have Jenny muted, and she shouldn't be because she's. part of the
She may have muted herself
Yeah, you
though.
can mute yourself.
Yeah, because I did unlock hers
Okay.
as a trustee. So I know that there's one that says, Kate, I'm going to ask you to unmute. And then you should be able to unmute yourself.
Okay, I'm not muted.
No, we can hear you.
Okay, great. I'm Kate Perkins. I'm from Warrenville Fire District, and I have a question. And that is that the chief said that your neighboring fire districts were open to discussing ceding territory. Could you say which fire districts you spoke with?
Carroll Stream, West Chicago, and Warrenville.
News to me. Being the president of the board, not happy to hear that. But so West Chicago, Warrenville, and Carroll Stream. Thank you.
Our three neighboring adjoining fire districts. I've spoken to the chief officer of all three.
Okay, thank you.
Matt Rich, School District Superintendent. I just want to express gratitude to Chief Evans and the Fire Protection District team. We have started the process because we did pass our referendum of work, and one of the first stage items is looking at our fire alarm system at Winfield Primary. The chief sat down with me and our engineers to help look at deficits and remediation opportunities. So thank you very much to Chief Evans and the Fire Protection District team.
Thank you. Okay, no other questions? Perfect. Go ahead, Bernie.
Sure. In preparing for tonight's meeting, the chief and I and Robin meet to look at any issues that need to be addressed. So one of the things that we did discuss was how to deal with some really serious misinformation that was being circulated with respect to the referendum or during the course of the referendum, but particularly as it related to the facts associated with our audit. And so I've passed a memorandum around, or the chief has. I have additional copies if anybody would wish to see it, because they contacted the auditor to review that, and the memorandum of the auditor is attached, but with regard to explaining how the accounting principles are applied to how money comes to the district and how it is spent, and how that affects us when you look at one snapshot in time with regard to the end of our fiscal year. The issue has been, it was widely disseminated that we have at the end of April of 2020, based on our audit, $2.5 million sitting in the bank doing nothing, plus the expectation that we were going to get the first installment of revenue, which then made it appear that we had nearly $5 million that was being unapplied, and yet we were asking for more. So when you look at the audit in a proper perspective, that was just wildly inaccurate. So what this memorandum does is it explains that what we actually have in our general fund balance, we have restricted funds such as audit and pension and tax liability. That's all spoken for and isn't part of this analysis. But with regard to our general fund, anything that's not in those restricted funds is in our general fund. And that's what we use for operations. At the end of April of 2020, we had, according to our audit, $2,459,487 in unrestricted general funds. Okay, that was composed of an assessment of our assets against our liabilities. Our assets were composed of cash and investments in the amount of $1,300,000. But also our assets included our entire 2019 levy, which at the time that the audit was conducted, we had not received one nickel off. Okay, we won't receive that. We didn't start receiving that until the following June. The reason that that's included as an asset is because on the accrual basis, the accountants look at that as any money that is certain to be received. And so that if it has a high degree of certainty, then it is booked as a receivable and therefore an asset. Doesn't mean we have the money. It just means that there's a certainty that it will be received. And so on that basis, our entire levy is now accounted for as of the end of the fiscal year of 2020. Well, if you want to misrepresent that, you can say, and as it was said, they had all that money last year. And at the end of the year, they still had $2.5 million left. That's just not the case. So what then we compare, so when you add the $1.3 million and about $1,000 of reallocation from another fund and our 2019 levy, we had assets of $3,821,000, against which we had liabilities, which were unpaid overtime that accrued that for services that were rendered by our firefighters in 2020, but they didn't get paid for the following fiscal year until June. That was about $93,000. There's also recognized expenditures of 1/2 of our levies that we expect to receive. And the reason for that is we have historically, from as long as I've been here, recognized half of the levy in the current year, and half of that levy expense in the following year, because of the way of the timing of when those expenditures occur. Okay, so then what happens is when we look at what really is occurring is we start the year with $1,300,000 in cash. That is exactly 5 months worth of operating expenses, which is within the generally accepted principles of what we ought to have as reserves. And we need to use that money because for the first 2 months, we don't get any revenue. Okay, for those first 4 months for the first 4 months of our fiscal year, we have no revenue. And then as of, we have about $800,000 worth of revenue that comes in starting June through September. But we have roughly $1,040,000 worth of expense during that same period. So what are we doing? We're drawing off of those reserves. When all is said and done, by the time that we allocate, but we also have budgeted expenses that are exactly the amount that we have levied. That levy money comes in by the end of the fiscal year. We spend that and then some. And when we do that calculation, we are going to end up next year with $1,119,000 in reserves, which is a significant reduction from the 5 months of reserve that we now have 4.5 months. So you can see the erosion of our reserves. So in making this explanation, Robin's eyes glaze over. as I think most people have done. So she said, is there a way that you can explain this in more layman's terms? And I think in firefighting terms, you have to look at it as if we were plumbing our fire trucks. And plumbing is just a matter of gazina and gazada, okay? So when we bring a fire truck to a fire, it has a tank of water on it. That's our reserves. And the reason we have that is to make sure that when we arrive at the fire, we can put the hose on the fire and water is going to come out. While we're doing that, we're hooking up that fire truck to a fire hydrant. Okay, and that fire hydrant is supplying water to that truck as it's applying water to the fire. That's the gazina. And what's coming out of the hose is the gazauda. So if we look at the amount of money that we've got in gazina and the amount of money that we've got gazauda, at the end of the year when the fire is out and we drive our fire trucks home, we've got a little bit less reserve in that tank than we did last year. Okay, and that's $1,119,000, and that's with what our reserves ought to be. It's nowhere near $5 million. We don't have money sitting around that's unapplied, and if we didn't have those reserves, we would be in real trouble in June and July of any given year.
And the last thing you want is not to be able to pay your firefighters.
Absolutely.
You've got to meet that paycheck.
And their pension.
And their pensions.
We're taking $42,000 a month out of our CDs to meet payroll.
Yep. Yep. And the other thing about that, and even if you want to be critical of saying, there was some criticism that, well, you really only need to have 8 weeks of reserves, and you guys have got, you know, the representative, we had 64 weeks of reserves or 18 months worth of reserves. The fact that we have that money is not only a reflection that of trying to maintain the reserves according to our fiscal policy, and we have a reserve policy in our fiscal policy, which we are required to have. The reason that those reserves are there is because we can't commit, or that we've made decisions not to commit to long-term expenditures, which would actually draw that down. Okay, so when they say no, that we cannot build a sufficiently staff, that you are not taking that extra step to expand your services and your operations to the extent that is recommended by the professional staff. And so when that happens, what you start to do is you start to make decisions about economizing, like having to go borrow someone else's truck while ours is being repaired. So that's the situation that we're in. So, you know, it took a significant period of time for our auditors to explain that and for it to be regurgitated according to, you know, the understanding of how the operations work. And so, the staff thought it was important to bring that to the attention of the board and to the public.
Thank you, Bernie.
Thank you, Bernie. No old business. Do I have a motion to accept the consent agenda?
So moved.
Do I have a second? Any questions, comments, concerns? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? New business. Adopt the tax levy ordinance number 335 for the fiscal year 2020-2021.
I'd like to make a motion to tax levy ordinance number 335 for the fiscal year of 2021.
Do I have a second?
Support.
Any questions on that? Is this a roll call or just voice vote?
Yeah. It must be a roll call.
Roll call vote.
Actually, all votes should be roll call, but when they're unanimous voice votes, we
Got
don't need to reconstitute them, so.
Robin, can you call the roll, please?
President Thing,
Yes.
Secretary Sus,
Yes.
Trustee Ellis,
Yes.
Trustee Simpson,
Yes.
Trustee Saley.
Yes.
All right, discuss and possible action on resolution 2020 R103 to conduct a limiting rate referendum. Steve, if I'm not mistaken, this is exactly the same as we did last time, correct? Same.
You are correct, sir. Ours
it's in the same year, our EAV has not changed one way or the other, so consequently, the same amount of money that we need to do the same stuff that we were talking about wanting to accomplish, hence everything's the same.
Except the dates have changed, and then it says our next election, and so it will be at the consolidated election, which will be April 6th, I believe. And I think the
With less
resolution
reserves.
that we have actually has the vote already tallied on that, so if it's different, we'll have to make that adjustment.
Robin, please call the roll. Or, sorry, do I have a motion to accept the passage resolution?
Motion to accept resolution number 2020 R103.
Do I have a second?
So moved.
Robin, please call the roll.
President Flakey?
Yes.
Secretary Sales?
Yes.
Trustee Kells?
Yes.
Trustee Simpson?
Yes.
Trustee Saylor?
Yes.
Okay. Next order of business, discuss and possible action on the County Farm Road property. Steve, can you bring us up to speed on what you've learned?
So based on the last meeting, I contacted Peter Cromans at Village of Winfield. The zoning, actually, I believe I included the zoning map of Winfield, and with the zoning of that County Farm Road property, it is zoned. Yes, it's PUD. The specific is R4A PUD. So according to Mr. Cronin's village, that is coded to either build a firehouse or single-family detached residential on that property. So that's the current status, zoning with it, and what it can be used for, and what could be done with it if it was sold out of the district. So that's what it has to do, and that's the answer.
Is he open to rezoning if a business or someone came in?
I had that conversation with some people affiliated with the village that had expressed an interest in that.
So I guess the question is, do we begin that? Do we look at what it would take to do that? What we do that, we are ceding the fact that we will be here for the duration, most likely.
Well, quite honestly, even if we pass the referendum is only going to guarantee that we're still here. It's not going to build us a new fire station.
Right.
It's not going to help us move. It's going to help us merely exist in our same spot.
And open up the south.
And open up the south, which will help responses to Wheaton and Warrenville and our residents on the south side. But we're not. I just don't see us having the monies unless it's just manna from heaven that falls on us and $7 million shows up and we have a building built. I think it's time to let the folly go and get rid of the property.
Phil, what are your thoughts?
I don't think we're there yet. I just don't think we're there yet. I think because of our close proximity to the hospital, there's still that opportunity that they may want the corner, and should they want it, they may be willing to pony up for those dollars. And for the little bit that we're going to get for it, I think it's worthwhile. I mean, that little bit we get for the property isn't going to push this district but another month down the road. So it's worthwhile hanging out for just a little while longer, especially due to the expense that we went through to acquire it. And if the miracle should happen, it would serve the district in a much more universal way than having two firehouses operating, because you can work with less personnel in one station than to have two stations, and then you got to double your personnel. So I don't think we're there yet. And we're not. We may get there, but I think for the little bit that it would help the district financially, we're better off hanging on to it with the hope that perhaps we could serve the district at a more efficient capacity should that time arise.
Randy, what are your thoughts?
See both points, but people on the north side don't want emergency response closer to them, obviously by the votes. Like George, we're just fighting to stay alive, and the referendum is just to keep us in this building. I'd like to see the numbers, total numbers, but, what it's going to save us, and is it worth saving the property that if the golden goose does fall, it's going to help us.
Jenny, what is your thought?
I mean, I personally, from day one, have been for Southside Station reopening. My very first meeting, the night we got sworn in, we had to deal with that county farm lot. So that deal was made before I ended up on this board. I would much rather see county farm gone and us reopen Southside Station. And if the hospital comes through someday, if that happens, we'll deal with that then. But that land it's not helping us. Yeah, it's just a tiny little Band-Aid, but it's something.
It's my guess with what we can get for it is 2 weeks worth of operating expenses, maybe?
2 months, maybe.
2 months? Well, we're talking a couple $100
We have to
grand.
find out what it's worth.
Yes.
Right.
We spend $300,000+ a month to operate.
And you're not gonna get a month out of it because it's
So-
only a couple acres.
It's 5 acres.
It's 2.3 acres. to be
With
exact.
the balance being retention. So, but it has value.
It has value, but like Phil said, I agree with Phil, it doesn't have that much value to us dollar
It
wise.
doesn't cost anything to own it. but
Right,
It
and
doesn't
in
help
the-
that much.
And if we do get the referendum passed and we are be able to stay here, we all know that's where we should have a station. We all know in a perfect world, we should have a station there. If we were to cede that land back to developing, and the hospital does come and says, we do want your corner, now we gotta go take people's homes. Instead of where we had the fight to take swampland. Now we're taking people's homes. And I have a problem with
It's
that.
not swampland. It's developed.
Well, no, back when.
It was not swampland back then.
Yeah, it was field.
It was a working farm.
Working
back
field,
then,
right.
with some wetlands that needed to be negotiated and offset. But I applaud the fact that you want to hold on to your dream. I think it's great, but it's a dream. And I'm a realist. And the town, the citizens in the town, the community has not pushed us forward. And we are going to come to a point, push or shove, and maybe it'll be April when we find out if we do or if we don't. But the few $100,000 that doesn't seem to be very important to anyone is important to the district, I think. So it's a new point at this time, but it's going to become important at one time.
Well, I agree. I mean, eventually we're gonna have to start selling assets.
It's a $500,000 piece of property at one time. I don't know what it's worth
I don't
now.
know what it's worth now. Jenny, go
Mark?
ahead.
When we first started talking about this point, you guys, I don't remember which one of you it was, but you said something about us looking into having it rezoned. We don't need to do that. The buyer would have it rezoned.
Right, correct. They would negotiate with the village to get that done before purchasing the property or confirmation, or however that process works.
So all it would really be would be a conversation, maybe initially with the village. Has there been interest brought to them for that land?
Actually, since the developer that developed the land around us shown an interest, should we want to?
Well, he has a first right of refusal, but I don't know if that's expired.
I think
That right of first refusal has expired, but
Okay.
that builder would always have interest in reclaiming those lots, I think, either 5 or 7 home sites, I think.
7, I believe.
Steve, you think you could reach out to that developer and just say, hey, ballpark figure, what do you think this would be worth?
I could, there was another entity affiliated with the village that expressed a very premature interest in the property as well.
I mean, maybe if nothing else, we can at least the board actually will have some actual numbers, you know, instead of our just pulling stuff out of the air, we actually have real figures or professionals' assessment of what that is, ballpark assessment. If you could reach out and get something for us. Any other questions on the property and more comments? All right. Discuss and possible action on ceding properties to neighboring districts. As Steve mentioned, he had a brief conversation with the leadership, the other chief officers of neighboring districts as a very basic, hey, what do you think? Do you think you guys might be interested in talking about this? There was obviously was no, you know, plan, hey, let's sit down, this is what we're talking about. It's more of a, do you think you and your organization and your boards would be interested in discussing this aspect? And appear to be interested that they'd be willing to talk about it.
And thank you for that, Mr. President. It was very much a, would you be willing to have a conversation kind of
Right.
discussion to that point?
Right. Where do we sit? Where do you all sit with the thought of ceding property?
To me, it doesn't make sense. And I say it because of this. Whether, you know, our district, whether it's the size of a softball or the size of a football, you still need a minimum of a fire truck, a tender, and an ambulance. And the more you cede to another district, the less tax revenue you have to maintain that tender, fire truck, and ambulance, not to mention the building, the house personnel. And when you look at it from neighborhood to neighborhood, you know, you see the whole neighborhood, you may get one ambulance call out of that neighborhood, you may get 10. But if it's a neighborhood that doesn't require a lot of attention, then you're giving up a lot of revenue that we're not giving necessarily a lot of attention. And so if you want to give something up, you know, give Mary and Joy over the week. You know, now we're talking dollars. But the reality of it is nobody wants an entity that doesn't pay taxes. You know, give the hospital the week, but we're not going to want it because they don't pay taxes. So our issue isn't, you know, I think seeding, you know, there was a time and place before I became a trustee, and actually we were talking about Carroll Stream taking over some property over on Gary Avenue. And, you know, and it was one of the board members of the American Legion that was pushing to get Carroll Stream to take over the American Legion property. And it was all an agenda on his side. But when I came on the board, my first question is, why would you give up property? Yeah, the American Legion doesn't pay taxes at this point in time, but the only time we go over there is for an ambulance call, in which case we can bill for. And someday they may not be able to maintain that, or they may sell off property, put homes in where we would gain some tax revenue. And I just don't feel it's a smart move to give up tax revenue when we're looking for more to maintain what we have. Why would you give it up? Because you still have to maintain a minimum, or we're definitely at a minimum.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, Steve. My understanding was that if we cede this property X amount, whatever that is, that balance, our dollar number levy remains the same. So everybody else's in the district's rate will increase by that 0.00001. So we will have the same amount of money, just a smaller area. The problem is when we raise if God willing our referendum passes, then we lose the increase in those neighborhoods. But immediately right now, we would not, if we ceded 30 acres or whatever, 20 acres or whatever it is, we would not lose $1. The dollars would remain the same. What we would lose out on is future increases if a referendum passes. That's the big downside.
I'm not aware of it. So what you're basically saying is by ceding property, you can inadvertently increase the tax revenue on everybody else's remaining.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
That wouldn't be inadvertent.
And maintain better fire services for the people
That remain.
responsible to. So we'd have less reciprocal calls back and forth to Carroll Stream, West Chicago, Winfield, Wheaton, wherever this property
Now,
may be.
granted, let's be transparent, we see 20 acres. We're not talking a significant decrease in call volume at the outset.
Isn't it a minimum of 60 acres?
Or whatever
The
60
statute-
acres, whatever the statute allows, is we are not going to see a significant decrease in call volume
Can we just
out
see
the
the
box.
force?
60-acre parcels for those willing to negotiate. Because and this would be for Attorney Weiler, but it's my understanding, how this would occur would be a resolution passed by each of the two entities to hand off the property. So that would simply be, we have arrived at an agreement that these parcels of land will be moved from, you're gonna start taking it over, we're gonna cede it, and that is the way that the disposition of this would go.
The residents in those parcels do not have a vote whether they go or stay, so.
No, there would be public hearings and all that kind of stuff, notifications and all of that, but at the end of the day, it's simply a resolution by the two governing bodies, as I understand it.
And then that parcel would assume the tax rate of the
higher
Of the new district where they would take it
Anyone
over.
that leaves our district is going to get a higher tax rate.
Right.
And that's what we're trying to vote in.
So, I mean, that's the thing is, if in the end, it's gonna have to be done 60 acres at a shot.
Right.
Over time to find that significant savings in call volume to happen. But then again, the future revenue, when people suddenly wake up and say, oh my Lord, we need to raise it now, instead of an 80% increase, they're now at a 95% increase.
Well, the future is April. So, I mean, it's not so far away that you can see it in your crystal ball, but it's close.
So we don't really need it. I mean, this is a good discussion.
It's a good discussion to have.
But the reality of it is,
It may be a discussion after April.
after April, correct.
In other years, we could very much be doing this after.
Well, and I think it's important for the residents who are watching right now to see it, and those hundreds that will watch this.
I was not aware that our EVA would stay the same.
Yeah. But people need to think about that.
EAV would drop, but the interpretation, and again, I've been through this with the treasurer's office, I've been through it with the county clerk's office, where actually we have a 22nd, we have a meeting. 22nd. With that, So we're going through a specific process to make sure that to make sure all of this is in fact true and accurate, and what the implications are going to be both ways. And because actually the interpretations I got from the county were not absolute. So the interpretation is that PTEL is based on the amount of money and the increase to the amount of money from year to year to year, which then EAV and your limiting rate is factored as a result of that. So that's the interpretation, and if that's the case, this is in fact the way it would go. We just want to make sure of that before we start doing this. We don't
Okay,
want to.
now it's, okay, now I get it. Now it's making sense. Okay.
And again,
Because
it is merely an option that we're investigating.
Okay, it just allows us to, okay, I get it.
Took me a while to.
Yeah, I
Couple
just,
explanations.
and you know, I'm thinking you get, okay, and no more discussion.
Yeah, and it's just a matter of doing
Now it
due
all makes
diligence.
sense, yeah.
We need to investigate all options, and this is.
Okay, that wasn't explained to me quite that way, but it makes sense now.
Well, I think it's certainly something that, as we go forward, that will probably, it may need to be revisited seriously. If the referendum fails again, that probably.
Yeah, then it makes sense.
Right. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Jenny, you have any question or comments on that?
Well, I was just gonna say that I don't think we're there yet. After April, maybe we're there to start looking at this, but I mean, I would hate to see us moving forward with this and then all of a sudden we still be the closest unit and we'd have to respond via mutual aid and then we get no money for calls that we're still going on. Get what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So
It's-
we're just not there yet.
We're not there yet, but we've got to at least
Should be prepared.
be prepared.
Right. Yep. All righty, next agenda item, discuss and approve waste hauler contracts. Steve, can you bring us up to speed?
Yeah, so the memo in your package, I specifically want to take this opportunity to thank Dr. Rich, Superintendent Rich, for his leadership on this. So at their November 4th meeting, and to preface this, as was indicated in my memo, for a number of years, the village negotiated an arrangement which was favorable for all the other districts, and we appreciate sincerely them doing that on our behalf to save us money. As a result of on their November 4th meeting, they had to negotiate a new arrangement. Then, and they agreed, and this was going to put us in a position where we had to make our own arrangements for waste haulers. Unfortunately, we didn't find out until November 20th that that was the case, some 16 days later. But we have a great, I can't even express it strongly enough, a great relationship with several of our other neighboring government entities. Dr. Rich's leadership, we got together, hey, we're all in this together, let's figure something out. We did, and then we arrived at the recommendation that is in the packet for a 3-year term because it's not going to get cheaper, so why not? They gave us the opportunity to lock in our pricing for 3 years. Why wouldn't we want to do that? And I believe this is the same arrangement that the other entities have gone with as well.
Thank you, Doc. Thank you.
Make a motion to approve the waste hauler contract.
Support.
All righty. Robin, please call the roll on that one.
President Blakey.
Yes.
Secretary Stas.
Yes.
Trustee Kellis.
Yes.
Trustee Simpson.
Yes.
Trustee Saylor.
Yes.
All right. Steve, discuss the possible action and a memorandum regarding deputy chief appointment.
So included in your package was a cover memo with a timeline and a suggested process for the pursuit of the appointment of the deputy chief's position, along with a draft version of a deputy chief announcement and job description. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them this time.
I read it twice. Kind of follows the discussion we had, so I have no questions.
I would, as a board member, volunteer to work with the chief if he had me to work on facilitating this if the board will have it, so that he has a little help with board representation.
And I'd be happy to fill in if there's any appointments that you can make.
Great. Okay. Jenny, you have any questions?
Nope.
Any? Okay. Then, Bernie, do we need a motion?
Need a motion to amend the regulations to replace the current job description and criteria with the current.
And then Steve can then
Yes,
proceed
and
with.
Then a second motion then to proceed with the recommendation of the chief.
Well, do I have a motion? First one Bernie mentioned about adjusting the job description.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any questions? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All righty. All right, second motion to proceed with posting and the process of searching out a deputy chief.
So
Second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Steve? Go for it.
Thank you very much.
Motion to pay the bills.
So moved.
Any questions on the bills?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Any opposed?
No.
I believe there is an executive session we can adjourn into. Steve,
Do you need an executive session, Chief?
We do for
personnel?
Oh, yes, for potential litigation and appointment of personnel.
Okay.
Yes, yes, we do.
Oh, yes. Someone glazed over, just.
Cloudy number.
That we didn't need one, but yes, we do.
So we're not coming on taking any action, correct?
No, yeah, we will.
Okay. Motion to adjourn into executive session for pending litigation.
So
Potential.
Potential, do I have a second? All in favor? Any opposed? Good night, everyone.
Thank you for.
Thank you all for showing up.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.